Hi folks, and welcome to part 2 of the short series of videos that I'm putting together, which talks about building panels in Air Manager. And in this part 2 I'm going to introduce a very basic level of panel scripting. Panel scripting is a very powerful tool within Air Manager, and it allows you to do a lot of very clever things with your panels. What I'm going to talk about here, and in fact in the next video, are really just the basics. I think enough to give you a quick understanding of the subject, enough to allow you to take a look at the panel scripts that are included with my Boeing packages, so that you can take a look at those and understand them and understand how they're built and what the logic is behind them, and then use those panel scripts, those Lua files, which are really just text files that you can open up in Notebook, that you can use those files then to build and modify your own panels. One thing I will say here is that I do things my way, and that may not necessarily be the only way, and it may not be necessarily the best way. It's the way I've derived. So I've really just done this by trial and error. I've tried something. If it doesn't work, well, I've scrubbed that. I've gone on to another way, and I've just kind of worked my way around and found ways to do things. There may be folk out there watching this who think, why are you doing it this way? Why are you using the most inefficient script that you possibly could? And if there are folk that see that, then please put something in the comments. Tell us what I'm doing, what I could be doing better. I won't say what I'm doing wrong, because it works, but tell us what I could be doing better, and that way we can all learn, because I fully appreciate that I may not be doing things quite the way I should be. Right, so that's the intro. On to the panel itself, and this is the panel that I made in part 1. It's a partial panel. I'm going to stick with this. I'm going to keep things short. The more instruments that we have in there, the more script there's going to be, and the more things are going to get lost or be harder to see. So we'll keep it simple, keep it short, and hopefully easier to learn. And what I'm going to do this time round is I'm going to take this vertical speed indicator, and I'm going to make it so that with a mouse press, or if you had a touchscreen monitor with a finger press, that can be swapped between a more modern TCAS unit and this VSI. And it's just an element of introducing some button presses into the panel, which will allow you to do things, change instruments, move them, resize them. There's all sorts of things that you can do using this similar technique. Okie dokie. So let's stop this. What I'm going to do first of all is I am going to take that panel. I'm in the Create Edit tab, and I'm going to clone that panel. And you'll see here YouTube Demo Clone. So let's just go to Intro, and I'm going to rename that Part 2. Sounds like a movie, doesn't it? Part 2. If I save that, what it means is that my original panel that I did in Part 1 remains untouched, unedited, and it's there that if everything went wrong, I can go back to it and use it. So I would recommend you doing that. If I open up the folder and just move that across, you'll see this is the structure of panels and instruments within Air Manager. There's a Logic Lua file, which is really just a text file that you can open up in Notepad. The info XML file, which that has all the information that we typed in earlier in part 1, if you remember, and it contains info on what instruments are included in the panel, etc. I don't really ever refer to it. It's there. It's used by Air Manager. It's not something that I'd use. Resources is empty at the moment. Into that you can put graphics, .png files, all that kind of thing. And I just closed it down too quickly. And then there's the library file, which there's nothing in it. I'm not quite sure what that's used for. I never use it. I just throw everything into resources. We now have Demo part 2 is the panel that I'm going to use for this second part of the tutorial. What I am going to do first is just hark back to part 1, and we are going to add the TCAS unit. So again, here, add instrument, I am going to sort or filter, and there we are, one TCAS instrument. Let's click on that, let's add that. VSI TCAS. Let me put the TCAS into the same position as the VSI. So 1500 is the left, 1500 pixels from the left hand side, 780 pixels from the top, and 400, 400, they should be fairly close. And then the final thing I'll do is that, other than getting the height right, is there is a captain first officer. There is a captain or first officer option on the TCAS. Let me just check that. Go into instruments, filter that TCAS. There we go. And actually, no, there isn't. No, there isn't. That's great. So I don't need to worry about that. Let's close that down and go back to part 2. So I think we are set up. So if I now run this, you'll see that the VSI is hidden because this TCAS unit is being drawn over the top of the VSI. I can change that, and I'll show you how we do that. If I close this down, let me open up the Lua script. Now on the other screen I actually have a script open from one of my panels. It's actually the Captain's Side Continental Airlines layout that comes as part of the package, and it's always helpful to do that because the great thing with this being a notepad file is that you can just copy and paste. It makes life so easy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy one line out of that, and I'm going to paste it in here, and that is the line for the TCAS instrument. And I'm also going to add another line, just again copy paste, and I'm going to call this top one VSI, and I'm going to keep the other one as TCAS. Whoops, there we go. And I'm going to just change that. What these two lines are doing is they are now telling the script that you have a VSI instrument, you have a TCAS instrument, you want the VSI instrument to be visible, visible equals true, you want the TCAS instrument to be visible. And then Z order is the order in which they are drawn on the panel, and this will override the order that you installed the instruments in the first place into the basic panel, and that is really a useful thing to know. What I haven't mentioned is this bit here after instrument get, and it's this great long code, and that code there is the instrument code that a manager uses to recognize the instrument, to recognize the VSI or to recognize the TCAS. It's a unique code. It doesn't use the English name that we've given the instrument, or if you're Italian, it doesn't use the Italian name that you've given the instrument. It uses this code. And you say to me, well, how do I find that code? Well, let me show you. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the info panel again. These are the instruments that have been loaded into this YouTube demo panel. Let's get the Lua file back open. I've got to tell it the code for the VSI, so I go back here, I right click, copy the UUID, which is what AirManager calls that ID text. So right click, copy that. I can go back now to my text file and I can paste that in. There we go. and you see there it's different. And I can do the same with the TCAS. It should hopefully be exactly the same as we already have in there, because I only have one TCAS gauge. If it's different, then something weird has happened. But I'll paste that in. Paste that in. There we go. That's there. Right. File. Save. Now the script knows that it's got two instruments to look out for. It knows what they are within EManager. It knows what I've called them, VSI and TCAS, and it knows here what order to draw them in. So it's going to draw VSI 1 and TCAS 2, which is exactly the same as we have, excuse me, as we had before. There we go. Right, shut that down. Open up that logic file, change the order. So draw the VSI second, draw the TCAS first, file, save, run that, and hey presto, it's now drawn the VSI second. So it's drawing the TCAS first, and then it's overwriting it with the VSI. So that's a very simple way that you can ensure that the order in which your instruments are drawn is the way you want it to be. Let's go back here. Now, what we'll do now is we'll introduce a button into the script, and we'll give that button some functionality. Now, I'm just going to, let's bring that across. I'm just going to copy and paste from one of my package panels. Doesn't mean anything at the moment, won't do anything at the moment, and I'm going to modify this now so that we can make it work with these two instruments. I'll talk through this in order of effectively how the thing is structured. I am going to have a button that is going to control a number which defines what I'm going to call VSI state. I need a timer in here, and I'm going to call that VSI callback, and I'm going to add a button, and that button is going to act when it's pressed, and I'm going to call it VSI pressed. There's also an option for VSI released. I am not going to worry about that for now. For the time being, I will keep that button up in the top left hand corner of the screen. It's always good to have a reference of where your button is. You can add an image. In this case, I don't have an image. It's going to be an invisible button. And what you can do is put that button over a mounting screw or something like that, just so you've got a visual representation. But for now, I am going to leave it in the top left hand corner of the screen, sort of up here. So it's at 0x, 0y, and I'm going to make it 100 pixels by 100 pixels, and I'm going to call it VSI pressed. When I press that, it is going to change this number that I've stated. There's going to be two states for that number, 1 or 2. By default, it's going to be VSI state equals 1. Then what I'm going to say is, when I press VSI pressed, when I press that button, if VSI state equals 1, which it is in the default, then VSI state will change to number 2. But if VSI state is 2 when I press that button, then VSI state will change to 1. So just cycle between 1 and 2. Now then, let's add the functionality of the button. VSI callback, which is what this timer is related to, and I'm going to say if VSI state is 1, then the visibility of the VSI, visible VSI, this instrument here, will be true, and visibility of TCAS will be false. You can see, I'll delete these, but you can see that you can link any number of instruments into this process. You just need to make sure that they're A, installed within your panel, and B, that you have defined them at some point in the Lua file. Now, if VSI state is 2, then I am going to say that the VSI will not be visible, so false. And I'm going to say that the TCAS will be visible, so true. I'll come back to this move in a minute, but for now I am going to delete those lines, and I'm going to delete that line, that set there, because they're not needed. We have a timer that effectively allows the button to function. We have the button defined with its position and its size, and that it's going to make things happen when it's pressed. We have what happens when it's pressed. It changes the state, this number that's defined here, and then we say, okay, well, if the state changes, we'll make this visible or not visible. So let's save that, run. There's the button up the top, press. State has changed, the TCAS now becomes visible, the VSI is invisible. There we go. Okay, now one of the things that I'd removed before was that move function, and that does exactly what it says on the tin. We have the sizes and positions of the instruments defined earlier when we entered them into the panel. But if I take the VSI here at 1500, 780, 400, 400, let me just open up that little file again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say now that I'm going to, when it's state 1, I'm going to move the VSI to that position, to 1500 left from the top left corner of the panel, and 780 pixels from the top. But now when I press the button and the state changes from 1 to 2, I'm going to say, look, I'll keep the VSI visible, so I'll just change that to 2, and now I am going to move the VSI, and I'm going to move it to, what is it, 400 wide, so let's make that to 1920 from the left. So if I save that now, click on OK there and go run. In state 1 by default, we've got the VSI visible. Click on that button. Oh, now it's kept the VSI visible, it's moved it to a new position, and now it's made the TCAS visible. And if I click again, it goes back to the original state. I've just done two simple functions there controlled by a button, and they're quite key to being able to manipulate your panels, and they're the ability to either make instruments visible or invisible, and to move them. Now there's other things you can do, there's other functionality. Again, I'd encourage you to investigate other scripts, existing scripts, and just look for examples. Hopefully this has just given you a first taste of what scripting can do. There we go, that's another little step. I'll try and do the scrolling bit tomorrow, but in the meantime, again, I hope this has been useful to you, and thank you for watching.